Good evening, everyone. I see our participants joining us this evening. We are so thrilled to have you all with us as we launch our We Were Born Ready campaign. My name is Kathleen Domingo. I'm the Executive Director of the California Catholic Conference. And today we launch a new campaign by the California bishops, We Were Born Ready. As we look to the U.S. Supreme Court's pending decision in the Dobbs case that has the potential to overturn Roe v. Wade, people all over the country have been asking the question, are we ready? Are we ready to help women in crisis? Are we ready to welcome every child with love? Are we ready to support families through positive policies and personal service? This evening, we'll be discussing what it takes to be ready. You'll hear from our amazing panel of speakers who will share from their experience and expertise. They'll share practical tips and challenges that each one of us can take so that we move from asking, are we ready, to asking, am I ready? If you haven't yet, please be sure to visit our website at wewerebornready.com to find resources, information, prayers, and legislative alerts. Everything you need is at wewerebornready.com. Our panelists will have some time to share their experience and expertise with us this evening, and then we will have time for questions and answers at the end. During the webinar, if you have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A. This evening, we are joined by an amazing panel of speakers. Unfortunately, Gloria Purvis, our dear friend, is unable to join us. She fell ill suddenly this afternoon and regrets missing this important discussion. So I ask that you would all keep Gloria in our prayers today. This evening, we welcome Bishop Oscar Cantú, who is originally from Houston and was installed as Bishop of the Diocese of San Jose in 2018, where he shepherds a community of 600,000 Catholics. Among his many degrees, he received a licentiate in sacred theology and a doctorate in dogmatic theology from the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome. Bishop Cantú has served on several committees with the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops and currently is a secretary-treasurer of the California Catholic Conference of Bishops. We have Charlie Camosy, who is a professor of medical humanities at the Creighton University School of Medicine. Charlie holds the Monsignor Curran Fellowship in Moral Theology at St. Joseph's Seminary in New York. He's a columnist with Religion News Service. He has published in numerous journals and media outlets and is the author of 8 books, including Resisting Throwaway Culture, one of my personal favorites. Charlie is also the author of 4 children, 3 of whom were adopted from the Philippines. We're also joined by Aimee Murphy, who is the founder of Rehumanize International, an organization to promote a consistent message of human rights and encourage effective dialogue to change hearts and minds. Her work has been featured in numerous media outlets, and she also has a book coming out this summer with New City Press called Rehumanize, a vision to secure human rights for all. Aimee is originally a California girl, but now lives in Pittsburgh with her husband. And we're also joined by Maria Martinez-Montt, who is the Respect Life and Gabriel Project Coordinator for the Archdiocese of San Francisco, Office of Human Life and Dignity. Maria previously served as the Director of Communications for a conglomerate of pregnancy clinics in the San Francisco Bay Area, and also worked in young adult ministry at St. Dominic's Parish in San Francisco. And now I would ask Bishop Cantú to start us off in prayer.
Okay, properly unmuted. Thank you, Kathleen. Well, let us begin. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Loving and gracious God, we are most grateful for the gift of life, that first gift that you give to us, that you share life and love. You invite us to share in this creative reality of bringing new life into the world and our families, through husband and wife. And this evening, as we discuss creative ways to respond to needs of young families across California, we ask your blessings upon us. We ask the presence and the guidance, the gift and the strength of your Holy Spirit to guide us with wisdom, with courage, with compassion, with love. We ask your blessings upon us this evening in our discussion. We ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen. In the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Thank you, Bishop Cantú. And now, can you please tell us why we were born ready and what the vision is that the California bishops have for the future of California?
Well, I'll try to do so. Thank you, Kathleen, for the introduction. On January 22nd of this year, all 12 bishops leading dioceses in California joined Pope Francis in affirming that abortion attacks the sacredness of human life, and that it is not progressive to try to resolve problems by eliminating human life. The California legislature has advanced no less than 19 bills and plans to invest $125 million of taxpayer money in the budget for abortion expansion. But the bishops of California have a different vision. Together, we have committed to a vision for the future of California that honors women with life-affirming support and practical resources so that all families can thrive, and so that no woman feels trapped into the devastating decision to end a life by abortion. The California bishops have a full-scale plan for a post-Roe California. We were born ready. And we want all 12 million California Catholics to join in. For the last several years, think pieces have been written across the media asking, are we ready for Roe to fall? Are we ready to help women, children, and families? The answer is yes. We were born ready. By virtue of our baptism, we have been made priests, prophet, and king together with Jesus Christ. For more than 2,000 years, Catholics have cared for the most vulnerable by founding the first hospitals and orphanages. We provide food, drink, clothing, shelter, healthcare, visit the sick and imprisoned, comfort the afflicted and the dying. This is who we are. Now is the time for the church to stand in the gap, to flood our parishes with love, compassion, and care we have for women, children, and families. California is uniquely situated to respond actively to the needs of women, children, and families. For over 50 years, the pro-life network in California has built support systems of pregnancy care centers and clinics, maternity homes, and resource centers. The California Catholic Conference annually supports the state's dynamic efforts to build programs for our most vulnerable populations, lifting families out of poverty and affirming the inherent dignity of each person. The Catholic Church is the largest provider of social services in California. We serve millions of the most at-risk families through our Catholic charities and diocesan ministries, our Catholic hospitals and healthcare systems, and our own Catholic schools and parishes. We invite the Catholic community in California and all people of goodwill to join us in our commitment to our sisters, that we will be by your side as you walk the journey of motherhood. We Were Born Ready is a movement to re-energize our Catholic community across all 12 dioceses and in over 1,000 parishes. The goal is to empower, equip, resource, and mobilize Catholics in their parishes to serve women, children, and families, especially women facing difficult and unexpected pregnancies. We have a tremendous panel this evening that will help us to understand the current moment and how we can respond by serving women, children, and families. So let's listen in, and then let's ask the Lord how we can respond to the call.
Thank you, Bishop Cantú, for providing that vision for us this evening. I think it's wonderful for Catholics in California to hear from our bishops directly and to see your leadership, and we really appreciate that. So thank you so much for being here and for articulating so clearly where we are and what we're capable of. And now I want to turn to our panelists and ask them the hard questions. How do we make this happen? How do we put flesh on this beautiful vision and this beautiful idea? So Charlie, I'm going to turn to you first. California's governor and legislative leaders would like to make California an abortion sanctuary, prioritizing abortion as the best solution to the many challenges women and families face. You write extensively about the throwaway culture that sees people as disposable and easily discarded. What would you say to Californians who want to upend the throwaway culture and build a community that truly values women, children, and families?
No pressure. First of all, thank you for inviting me to be part of this, I think it's fair to say, ridiculously important conversation. I was just thinking about it while Bishop was talking, and I think if we're fortunate enough to live to be elderly one day, as I hope to be, I think young people may ask us what it was like to live through the time we're living through right now. And perhaps they may even ask to give us an account, for us to give an account of what we were doing, how we responded to the current moment. So again, this is very important, and I'm just honored to be a part of the conversation. Now, let me also say that I did spend 1 year of my life in California, but there are plenty of other people on this call who know what's going on the ground much more than I do. But I will say that my sense is that, much like two other states that I work in, live in, New York and New Jersey, there seems to be a lot of work for the pro-life movement to do to resist throwaway culture when it comes to, especially, but not only, to abortion. And a foundational goal, it seems to me, would be to begin by showing two things. First, that we do what we do because we care about women. It's a foundational value for us. And that two, there is no inherent tension, as some see that there is, between working for justice for women and working for justice for their prenatal children, our prenatal children. And it seems that, especially speaking as a Catholic theologian, moral theologian, that one fantastic way to show this is by doing something we should be doing anyway already, and many are doing, which is having a preferential option for the poor. Here's a really important thing to absorb, I think. Gallup continually finds that it's the poor, and especially poor people of color, frankly, who are most against abortion, especially when compared with those of us who are more economically secure, and especially with white people who are most economically secure. But if we think about the fact that this is the population most likely to be against abortion and also has the clear majority of abortions in California and elsewhere, I think a really diabolical situation kind of presents itself. Hundreds of thousands of economically vulnerable Californians are being pushed abortions that they don't want to have and think are morally wrong, in fact. So I guess what I want to lead with is, what would it mean to support we had a focus, what would it mean to support these economically vulnerable women? Certainly it does not mean doing what California is doing, or at least the state of California is doing, which is providing more of what these women think is morally wrong and don't want to have. In fact, this is what Pope Francis called throwaway culture. Obviously, babies are getting discarded, but in a very real way, the women are being discarded too, and their authentic choices are being discarded as well.
Unmuting, sorry. Thank you for that. So I have a follow-up question for you. I think that we all have heard those statistics before, right? That it's very often the poor women, it's very often women of color who don't want abortion, but are often pushed to that decision. So in California, we've been talking about this as really being akin to coercion, right? For women who don't want abortion, but feel that that's the only option that's presented to them. From a policy perspective, do you have any recommendations for ways that we can work together sort of across the aisle? Because some of the proposed solutions to help women are not things that sometimes people who consider themselves pro-life would embrace. And I know you write a lot about this. And so I'm putting you on the spot a little bit to ask you, how can we maybe overcome that dichotomy a little bit and learn to work together for solutions that will really provide women and families some true alternatives?
Well, you personally have educated me on so much of what's going on in California has been passed and is available to women in California when it comes to some of these supports. And California leads the country in some ways when it comes to these supports already in place. So kudos to Californians for putting these supports in place. But before we get to what you asked about, if I can just say, justice for women and justice for children requires that everyone receive justice, including prenatal children. I know it seems a long way away in California for there to be anything like prenatal justice, but I think that has to be a focus of the pro-life movements. If we aren't working for that, we really miss something fundamental about what justice is. That said, if we're talking about justice for women and prenatal children and families in the whole shebang, again, my understanding is that California is really well underway to achieving this with paid family leave, equal pay for equal work, help with childcare, workplace protections based on family status. Again, there are people on this call who could speak more to this than I can, but thank you, California, for leading the way on this. I guess I would put forward finally two other areas of consideration for us to consider here, maybe. It seems that a lot of states and a lot of localities think first about supporting women in their desire to be both mothers and full-time workers. And that's good, period. It's good. But what about, I think sometimes women who want or need to work part-time or even devote their full-time to domestic labor kind of can get left out of these conversations. So by all means, let's do what we can to protect women and support women who desire to be full-time workers and also mothers and participating in families. But let's also not leave these other women out to dry. Let's think about creative ways to include them in our support as well. And then the second and final thing I'll just mention for now too is that abortion correlates very strongly with intimate partner violence, especially for women who have multiple abortions. And I think we really need an all hands on deck approach as states, as localities, as a nation, as a church, to try to address this current reality, both in its manifestations, but also its root causes as well.
Thank you very much for that. I think you've given us a lot to think about. And I just want to reiterate what you said about justice for women and prenatal justice and justice for all have to go all together, because we need justice for everyone if we're really going to create a culture of life and a culture that supports life. So thank you for that. Aimee, now let's turn to you. You have a powerful story that helped craft your pro-life views. Can you share with us what led you to the belief in human rights for both women and their unborn children?
Yeah, and thank you again for having me, Kathleen. It's really, I think, a joy and a challenge to be here talking to, members of my old home state. So it's the whole reason that I got involved in pro-life work, but really human rights work at all, was because when I was a sophomore in high school, I was in an on-again, off-again relationship with a guy, in that stage of my life where I was trying to figure out everything, including my sexual orientation, and was questioning everything. And when I told him that I wasn't comfortable sleeping with him anymore, on Valentine's Day, he raped me. And I didn't talk to him after that. Our relationship was over and done with at that point, but word eventually got back to him a couple months later that I thought I was pregnant. So I remember I was in my drafting class one day, and he came and pulled me out, took me to the hallway and said, "Aimee, you need to get an abortion. I'll drive you and I'll pay for it, but you need to get it taken care of." And I, of course, was panicking because abortion was the only thing on my mind. I was a student at the top of my class, slated by my teachers, headed, they said I was headed to an Ivy League school. And so I was thinking of nothing but abortion. And yet I questioned him and I said, "Why is this important to you?" And he said, "Well, I don't want my mom to find out about what happened." And I just sort of sighed and was standing there, mouth just totally agape. I think my jaw was on the floor. Like, "You're trying to hide what you did to me. And then he said to me, Aimee, if you don't get an abortion, I'm thinking that I might kill you. And despite the fact that I froze, I also knew that I couldn't be like him. So, I was like, get out of here. Like, that was not okay. Like, I went back to my classroom crying. And I was so afraid. I didn't tell anyone, though. I didn't tell my teacher. I didn't tell the principal. I didn't tell the police. I didn't tell my parents. I was mortified by both the thought of telling my parents that I thought I was pregnant, but also by the fact that I had tried to warn my friends about how toxic of a person he was. And they had all said, like, no, like, you're a slut, you're a whore, it's your fault. They didn't believe me. So as I was walking back to my classroom, though, I knew something else. I knew that abortion couldn't be the answer, because functionally, I guess in that moment, I just felt this deep, sense of compassion for preborn children. I'd taken biology. I already learned the scientific fact that sperm egg fusion creates a new, distinct, unique living member of the parent species. I think that up until I was threatened, it just hadn't occurred to me how abortion intentionally ends that human's life. But when my ex-boyfriend threatened to kill me, I suddenly felt this sharp and stunning solidarity with the prenatal child. I knew that what my ex was telling me was, you're an inconvenience to me and you're an inconvenience to my future, therefore I'm going to kill you. And I didn't want to be like him. Like, it was suddenly so clear to me how abusive he was and how violent he was. And I knew that I didn't want to be like him. I knew that violence couldn't be the solution to a crisis, that I couldn't use violence and oppression to achieve my goals. That in fact, using the violence of abortion is just passing oppression on to another defenseless and innocent human being. So in that moment, I think I also saw that abortion is a tool of the patriarchy, that men use it so often to be free of the responsibilities of raising a child, and that men are so often the coercive factor behind abortion. When we see the fact that mortality rates for pregnant people are like just stunning when you consider the amount of intimate partner violence waged against pregnant people. Like, I'm fairly certain, if I recall correctly, like the number one cause of death for pregnant people is intimate partner violence. And I think a lot of that stems from men not wanting to be responsible for the children that they help create. So I could see then that abortion was this tool of this continued oppression of men against women, where they basically expect women to also continue this oppression against their children. I think I understood it then too as really this consequence of this like larger patriarchal structure that sees the cisgender wombless male body as normative. And when that's the case, it's just so easy for me to see now that It's part of the reason why menstruation is seen as disgusting, despite the fact that 50% of the population goes through it for a substantial portion of their life. It's the reason that pregnancy is seen as a disease condition. It's the reason that childbirth and childbearing are seen as inconveniences within our larger culture. And it's the reason why my ex threatened to kill me. So understanding that violence couldn't be the solution, I was drawn further and further into feminism. And those who may be watching or be like, Aimee, I'm not sure if you heard, but feminists support abortion. So I'm gladly here to say, if you don't already know, there's a really strong contingent of pro-life feminists that have existed all the way since the days of Susan B. Anthony and Mary Wollstonecraft. So we have a really strong foundation because we understand that feminism is the movement for social and political equality, regardless of sex, gender, or other circumstantial factors. The core principles of feminism are equality, non-discrimination, and non-violence. And like equality is like this human equality of dignity is the center of this moral idea, and non-discrimination flows from that, and non-violence flows from non-discrimination. So after I learned at 16 how abortion functioned, after this whole experience, I went online and I, Googled, because Google was a thing then. I remember Google began to exist I was informed about it in my 5th grade computers class. So I went online and Googled it, and I was like, what is abortion? And I learned that how abortion functions, that it functions through intentional starvation or dismemberment or poisoning. And I was like, oh, wait, any sort of feminism that supports abortion actually reinforces structures of inequality, of discrimination, and of violence. So I really like to say that this whole experience that I endured at 16 unsettled me so radically that I've made it my goal ever since to go and unsettle the rest of the world. Because to live in a culture, to be comfortable in a culture that is so steeped in violence and dehumanization is functionally to be complacent and to be complicit. So to build a culture of peace, instead, we have to unsettle the violent and dehumanizing status quo. So for me, that means embracing a consistent life ethic. And of course, I obviously think everyone should believe that, otherwise I wouldn't be talking about it. But I think it's a really solid foundation for all of us as pro-lifers to work from as we seek to save the preborn and their mothers from abortion.
Thank you so much, Aimee, for your testimony and for sharing your very powerful story. Not everyone has gone through an experience like that, but with your sharing, I hope that everyone can put themselves in your place and come to that same understanding of what you went through and how you saw so clearly the humanity of an unborn child, and also your desire not to participate in that ongoing violence that sometimes takes that form of just recurring, right? One violence begets another violence. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that's really helpful for all of us as we think about how are we to frame these conversations with our friends, with our peers in California, and what kinds of things can we use to talk, especially about rehumanizing women and children and everyone in our culture, especially the most vulnerable. So thank you so much. Maria, I'd like to ask for some practical suggestions from you at this time. You coordinate the Gabriel Project in San Francisco, helping moms in every way possible. What does it look like when you accompany women through their pregnancies and as new moms?
Well, we first meet her and try to get to know her, listen to her story. We make sure we meet her in person. When we meet her, the goal is to build a bond, to build a friendship, to dig deeper and no, not just to provide material things and that's it, but we wanna be there for the woman, and the only way to do that is to become a friend. So the goal of every angel that we call the women and men that belong to our program is to do that, to let the woman tell their story, to dig deeper on her situation. We will start talking about her family situation. Does she have other children? We inquire about the other children too, because we're not only interested in the unborn baby, we're interested also on the children that are already alive, and we want to make sure their well-being is good. So we try to understand, does she have a partner? Is she alone? Does she have a support system? Is she being threatened? What does that look like? And then we try to address all that, and we do that through material support, through emotional support, and of course through spiritual support. And so we make ourselves available to her. The angels make themselves available to her. And these can take really the shape of anything from being a good listener, from driving her to medical appointments, through providing childcare. We had, for example, a woman that recently was taken care of by a group of angels, and the mom wanted to go back to work, but she was having trouble getting childcare together. So a group of angels got together, and while she was trying to arrange that, would be there for her. So they did the childcare for a little while, so she could get herself situated. And then many times, it depends really on how deep the woman wants to go with that friendship. Sometimes women are not interested in that, but others, those that are, it can really blossom beautifully. We've had women, angels, that have even become godparents of many of these children. So the angels are there, available for the women, and to be there for them and to go as deep as the women allow themselves to be loved, really.
There you go. Thank you, Ria. That's a beautiful ministry that you described. And I think it's something that many maybe parishes or dioceses or even just individuals and families have tried to do to a different extent throughout the past number of decades. I know that there are a lot of resources in California and throughout the country. And the USCCB has a program, Walking with Moms in Need, also that's very similar. It's asking people to really accompany women and children and families. And I think that's also what our California bishops have asked us to do in a very meaningful way. How can we accompany women? And so thank you for that ministry.
Thank you.
In addition to that, you have done some really beautiful advertising in San Francisco for the Gabriel Project around the real needs that women have. And so as we are looking to help women find those good pro-life and life-affirming resources in California, can you help us understand what did you find the most helpful in reaching out to women who needed your help the most?
Well, that campaign was done by a group of volunteers that lended their expertise, and we were very fortunate to be able to provide a lot of different means. Normally, we don't necessarily have the means. We run a very thin budget, but that campaign, we did bus ads, social media, and billboards, and we had referrals from all of those means. However, we tried the social media Snapchat, and that was surprisingly very good. We also did the texting, and women really responded to that, inquired. And so, I was in charge of texting women back and forth and trying to figure out how we could help them, and some, would be interested and go forward, and others weren't. And so, but it's good to just make people aware that we're there. We don't know if down the road they will use our services. So it was a very successful campaign, and a very beautiful one too.
I can't unmute, sorry. Thank you so much for that. The campaign was lovely, and you had so many women really respond. And I just think that that's fantastic, and things that we can learn from as we broaden and amplify this message across our state, especially in these coming days and weeks and months, when we know that so many women will really need this message in a particular way. So thank you to all of our panelists. We have been getting some really helpful questions in our Q&A. And so I'm going to start asking some questions, and I'm going to put some of you on the spot here. Aimee, we talk a lot in the Catholic Church about how women are the second victims of abortion and how each woman deserves healing. Can you tell us about a restorative justice approach for women who have experienced abortion? And how does this approach help women find peace and wholeness?
Of course, I'm happy to. So I think all of us can agree that the knowledge that abortion kills more than 2,000 children in the US every day is a huge travesty. But that also means that on average, over 2,000 women a day are also traumatized by the violence of abortion. And that's just the people who are having the abortions, not their families, not partners, not communities, not their churches or extended families or friends, potential godparents, like that sort of thing. That I think when we lose someone who's older, maybe even just a 5-year-old, I think a lot more understanding is present about the loss that we as a whole society and a whole community endure just from the lack of their existence anymore. It's not something that we, I think about too often when it comes to abortion. So what restorative justice really means is, instead of seeking retribution and punishment, to really seek restoration and healing in the process of justice. To get a basic definition, justice, often refers to what someone is due. And I think often we can too often focus on, like what punishment they might be due or what consequences a person might be due. But I think in the process of researching what restorative justice means, it really centers on what do we deserve based on our inherent human dignity, not based on things that we've done, but just based on the fact that we are human beings, that in the words of, like Catholic social teaching, that we are made in the imago Dei. What does that mean for justice? So a restorative justice model seeks to make amends for wrongdoing and heal that rift that violence creates in a community. And so, like in this case, it's acknowledging the harm that abortion is, while also seeking to heal that harm, seeking to make amends, not only, as much as possible to the preborn child, unfortunately, who's already passed in the case of abortion that's already happened, but also to, other family members, to oneself, if you've had an abortion, to kind of deal with the mental health repercussions of that, and to have a community respond and say, where did we go wrong? Why did this person feel the need to have an abortion in the first place? So a restorative justice model would seek to involve everyone who is involved in that abortion decision and everyone who was touched by that harm. So not only the person who procured the abortion, not only their partner, not only extended family members and community members who might have been involved in that coercion process. Like, for example, like at a workplace, did a boss insinuate that a woman might not be able to progress in her career if she had a child? That sort of coercion is the sort of thing that a restorative justice model would bring into the equation and would help respond to. So it asks, why the person had the abortion, and then seeks to address those whys, like those reasons, the perceived need for abortion in this case. So it brings communities together to repair systemic injustices and overcome prejudices and implicit biases, and then make restitution for the wrong that was done in a way that doesn't seek to heap on punishment, that doesn't seek to contribute to the prison industrial complex, where we have the highest rate of incarceration in the developed world. Instead, it seeks to really respond to the root causes of violence by responding to the needs that people have in the first place, and trying to meet people on a community level to address those needs, instead of just heaping punishment onto people who are often already extremely traumatized and hurting so much after abortion.
Thank you. I really appreciate those comments. And so many of our dioceses do have post-abortion healing ministries and different resources like that to share with women, with families, with people who have been affected by abortion. And so many people who are told abortion's not a big deal. Why are you so concerned about it? Why do you keep talking about this? Or why are you feeling down as a result of abortion? We're told that it's not a big deal. And we are here to affirm that it is, in fact, a very big deal. And women who have been, and families and people who have been affected by abortion, we want to be here for you, and we want to offer hope and healing. And so I encourage you, if you or someone is experiencing some feelings following abortion that you need to have help to heal, please reach out to your local diocese for that. And now, Charlie, I have a question for you. We have seen just in the last few weeks since that leaked decision of the court on Dobbs, an amazing amount of polarization between sort of these different camps in the United States and here in California for sure, where people seem, rather than coming together, to just be pulling apart even more than usual and using rhetoric that is extreme and divisive and meant to be divisive. So what would you suggest as a good way that we as Catholics in California can help to break down those barriers of a throwaway culture and come together in this moment, even if we come from different perspectives, different ways of life, different sides of the aisle? How can we ourselves as a Catholic community do that?
The first thing I think we need to understand is that there's a lot of forces present in our lives, especially, but not only online, which make a lot of money keeping us polarized, right? And keeping us angry and keeping us anxious, and defining ourselves by opposition to the other instead of in solidarity with the other. And so maybe that's just the foundational thing we can do more generally, right? Is just be aware of these forces, be aware of what's happening here. But practically speaking, what we can do is also focus on the fact that the so-called life versus choice model for thinking about abortion just doesn't translate on what actually the reality is in California or anywhere else. About 6 in 10 people in the United States think abortion should be broadly legal before week 12. About 7 in 10 think it should be illegal after week 12. That is not a pro-choice or pro-life group of people. That is a very conflicted, complex group of people who are still, frankly, figuring out what they think about abortion. Tricia Bruce over at Notre Dame did a great study on this and said that most people haven't really thought through much about abortion. They don't have much of a grounding in the issue. I saw that one of the questions in the Q&A was about Catholic moral theology. Everyone has their position on abortion, regardless of their theology. There's secular pro-life. There's people who are pro-choice who are Catholic. There's Catholics for choice. So there's lots of different positions, lots of different perspectives, but there really isn't. There's a dynamite opportunity to actually talk about this moment, to actually come together and have a conversation that matters. That's one of many good things that will come from Roe going away, I think. People will be invested in these conversations in ways that matter. It's not going to be decided by 7 unelected men who have terms for life, but it's going to be decided by people like those on this call who are going to go out and talk to others and engage others, hopefully in solidarity, to maybe get some more perspective, get some foundational knowledge, get some clear thinking about these sets of issues. So let me just finish with this. It's just a clear opportunity for us to help shape a real conversation, something we never really had in this country.
Excellent, thank you. I think that that gives us some hope, and I appreciate that. And that's a perfect segue to a question I have for Bishop Cantú. We talk a lot about ending abortion through legal means, and that's what we really hope to do. But we also know that we need to end abortion by decreasing the need for abortion, the desire for abortion, by changing hearts and minds. And sometimes, especially right now in California, when we're faced with this deluge of abortion expansion legislation, all of this taxpayer budget money going to abortion, and then just yesterday, the California legislature introduced a bill that would codify abortion without any restrictions whatsoever into the California Constitution. We have a big fight ahead of us. So I wonder if you could help us have some hope in this moment. Where do we find hope? How do we change our own hearts and minds? And how do we lovingly and with faith and with hope help others to change their hearts and minds to have a greater appreciation for life in this moment of abortion deluge in California?
You know, I appreciate what Charlie just mentioned a minute ago about how there are forces that that benefit by keeping us polarized. And, you know, I don't think we were always so in this country. A lot of it is media, and and now it's to the nth degree with social media. And, you know, I live in Silicon Valley, so a word that I've heard, if I had a nickel for every time I've heard algorithm. And, you know, the algorithms keep us locked into our echo chambers and keep us polarized. And so, you know, how can we have real human conversations and see another person as a person? You know, I think Pope Francis is on to something really critical, just simply about, and it's not just about the Catholic Church, it's about being human. Can we listen to each other? You know, I sometimes turn on the radio or the television, and I see and hear people yelling at each other and yelling over each other. And I cringe when at the end of their debate, you know, they shake hands and say, "Oh, this was fun. You know, let's do it again." I thought, holy cow, you know, that doesn't look like fun to me, because it's not about trying to convince somebody. It's not about a coherent argument. It's about yelling and you know, this force of an opinion or position. But I think that humanizing our communities and our societies starts with recognizing the other as created in God's image and likeness, and getting to know them and appreciate them as a human person, and listening to their concerns, their troubles. You know, I think something that you know, Maria spoke about a few minutes ago, when you sit down, as you know, the importance of meeting them in person to see another human being. It's different than seeing us in a little square, or seeing someone just as another number or another problem in society. You see them as a human being. And I think there's a lot of work for us to do as a church, and I think it begins with humanizing the other, and not seeing us as us against them. And even within the church, you know, it's sad. And I've in every diocese that I've worked in, a few now, you know, I've always spoken about that as as a scandal that, many times in the church, we have our pro-lifers who won't talk to our social justice people and vice versa. And, that's why everywhere I've been, I've created the Life, Justice, and Peace office, because those have to come together. We have to model civility. We have to model recognizing human dignity across the spectrum of issues. So I think modeling that behavior in our own communities, I think that's another element of bringing justice, bringing peace. Excuse my dog Dante is getting excited now. So I think those are some of the elements where we can become models of compassion, of civility, of recognizing human dignity, and of listening to each other. I think we can start there.
Thank you so much, Bishop. And, listening to all of our speakers this evening and seeing some of the questions come through, clear that this is a moment for courage. It's a moment for us to be prophetic. It's a moment, and all of our speakers have alluded to this, it's a moment for us to see the dignity of the other everywhere we go. So as we're accompanying women, as we're listening to them, as we're listening to people with whom we disagree, as we're having conversations, as we're discussing with people who've experienced abortion, all of those moments are moments to recognize their dignity and to reflect this loving peace to the other people that we're talking to and that we're working with. And so I want to thank you all for sharing that. I do just want to also remind all of the people who are with us on our webinar this evening, who are joining us from throughout California, to look at our website, wewerebornready.com. On that website, we have links to all of the resources from all of the dioceses around California. You can take a look and find not just statewide initiatives and ways to get involved, but also local ways to get involved by clicking on the links that are on wewerebornready.com to see what your local diocese is doing. And I would encourage you to sign up for those local efforts so that you can be a part of these courageous and hopeful and prophetic solutions that we're talking about this evening. So now I have one last question that I would like all of you to take a stab at. I'm going to start with Maria. Maria, today we launched this new campaign, We Were Born Ready. And as we discussed at the beginning of the webinar, Christians are born ready by virtue of our baptism to step out in faith and accompany women, children, and families in need. For all of us participating on this webinar and others who will listen later, at wewerebornready.com, what is the most impactful thing that a parish can do, a Catholic family can do, even an individual can do to build a culture of life?
I say get involved, find out what your diocese is doing, if they have a Gabriel project, or they have a Respect Life ministry, 40 Days for Life. There's so many ways people can volunteer. I have an army of volunteers that I could not do it on my own. It's impossible. I just cannot. So people are needed. And so it's just a matter of making themselves available, go on, call each diocese and find out what your diocese offers and get involved.
Excellent. Thank you. Charlie, would you like to respond to that same question?
Sure. And if you don't mind, I'm going to step back and make a more meta or foundational point, if I can first. I think there's something. I'm so glad you mentioned baptism in the at the beginning and now here. I think there's something just essential about realizing that as fellow baptized Christians, fellow baptized Catholics, we are family, right? Like real family. Not implied family or sort of like family or analogously family. We are brothers and sisters in Christ with all that this implies. And so what if we actually thought it was our family members who were having abortions because they felt like they had to choose between putting food on the table for their children and having another child? What if it was our family members who are having abortions because their spouse or boyfriend or father threaten physical abuse if they didn't? How would we make space for them? How would we open our doors? wouldn't we just offer all the support we could? Wouldn't we just drop everything for our family to do that if it was a family member in those situations? Well, these fellow baptized Christians, fellow baptized Catholics are really our family. And we need to think of our churches and parishes not merely as sacrament dispensers, though the sacraments are super important, but as places where we go to see and support our family. And if we actually do that, if we actually did that, if we actually lived that out, I think we've gone a long way actually to creating a culture of encounter and hospitality as opposed to throwaway culture.
Thank you for that. That was very, very helpful. Aimee, did you have a comment or an answer to that question?
Sure. So, I mean, regardless of whether we pursue, I think, support for families, for pregnant people, for prenatal children in the law or in charity or culture or whatnot, we have a lot of work to do. Personally, I think that it would be to our benefit to try to find common ground with people on the other side of the abortion issue and work where we can find solutions to reduce the perceived need for abortion. So advocating for life-affirming resources in legislation to address problems like the basic need for housing, for healthcare, for childcare, for food, for clean water. You know, how are we responding to the crises of maternal and infant mortality, particularly in Black and Latino communities? How are we walking in solidarity with people with disabilities and their families or parents who receive a difficult prenatal diagnosis? I think that we can build life-affirming laws, in communion, even with people who are pro-choice, with people who might support abortion in some or all cases. You know, we can find life-affirming answers to many of these crises that lead people to pursue abortion, even if it might take decades for California to get to, passing legislation that really protects prenatal children in the law. I think you can work on addressing that demand side for abortion by working on common ground issues. So I think, that's what I would say is where I think a lot of good can be done.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of your leadership here this evening on this webinar. There is so much work to be done. And as I said a little bit earlier, just yesterday, the California legislature introduced a constitutional amendment that would codify abortion without any restrictions into the California Constitution. This would be the most open-ended and farthest reaching abortion legislation anywhere in the United States. And so we are going to need your help every single day as we build a culture of life here in California in our families and our neighborhoods and our parishes. We're going to need your help doing all of these things that our speakers have indicated. We're also going to need your help very practically a little bit later in the year as we build a campaign to try to oppose this constitutional amendment and get out the vote in November for people to say, this is not what we want for the future of California. We have a very different vision for the future of California that Bishop Cantú so beautifully discussed early on in the webinar. And so I encourage you, please, to go to wewerebornready.com, sign up there to become mobilized, to join us. You'll receive action alerts, but also there you will see countless resources that can be put into use immediately. We have prayer cards. We have ways you can get involved at the local level. We have resources that you can share with people who are in need, who are in crisis pregnancies right now, who need help parenting and with their families. So everything is there for you, and we'll be adding additional resources as we go along. And I would just ask everyone to please pray about where the Lord is calling you. When we say we were born ready, it's time for us to say, how am I ready? And how am I making myself ready for this particular moment? I think, Charlie, you started us off this evening by saying that at some point in the future, maybe our children or grandchildren might ask us, where were we at this historic moment and what did we do? And I think we all want to say that we were part of the solution, that we were actually the helpers. When you look and you say, who are the helpers? We want to be counted as helpers. And so I would encourage each of you, go to wewerebornready.com and find out how you can help. And if you have additional suggestions, leave them there for us so that we can add that to our list. And finally, this evening, I would like to thank our sponsor, the McGrath Institute for Church Life at the University of Notre Dame, and remind people that both Charlie and Aimee have new books through New City Press. So if you liked what they had to say this evening and you want to learn more from them, go ahead and purchase those books and read them and learn more about this movement and what we can all do together. And then finally, if I can ask Bishop Cantú to lead us in a little closing prayer and send us all off out to do this great work we've discussed.
Absolutely. Thank you. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, loving and gracious God, we thank you for this opportunity to discuss the dignity in which you have created every human being. As we lift up women, children, and families this evening, may you guide us and strengthen our hearts and our hands, that we may truly find you present on the margins, those who are invisible, those who are hurting, and particularly women in troubled pregnancies. As Jesus was recognized yet in the womb, in that moment when Mary encountered Elizabeth and John the Baptist encountered his cousin Jesus for the first time, both in the womb. May we encounter you present in the womb as well, and those who carry those children. Lead us with your love, your compassion, that we may recognize you on the margins. And we ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our speakers this evening. Thank you to everyone who has been with us this evening and all those who may be viewing this webinar a little bit later on. Don't forget, go to wewerebornready.com to register, and we look forward to seeing all of you as we work together to build a culture of life in California and beyond. Thank you all. Have a good evening.